Awesome. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good day to everybody in the Neo community and abroad. We're hosting another panel for the Polaris Launchpad event. The past few weeks, we've been lucky to hear from brilliant minds inside and outside the Neo ecosystem to talk about various different functions and uh, types of ways that people can use blockchain to help educate and just share subject matter experience with potential people who are participating in the hackathon. So today we will be talking about DAOs. The name of the panel is How Will DAOs Change Your Life? And we're lucky to be joined by three prominent members of the Neo ecosystem. Before I introduce them, I again want to thank Neo Global Development for inviting me to host this panel. It's been a pleasure to be able to chat with so many interesting and knowledgeable folks. And thanks to Sam for staying up late so that we can get these live streamed. So to kick off, I'll just do a brief introduction of our three guests. Today we have Wang Longqiang, who also goes by Alibaba. Maybe some people know him as that online. He's been a researcher with Neo Global Development, primarily focusing on blockchain, AI, cybersecurity, and has been working on the Neo ecosystem since 2018. Additionally, today he'll be talking a little bit about NeoBurger and hopefully sharing some more information about how DAOs can interact with this new governance project. We also have Claude Mueller, who has been with AxLabs for a handful of years now. His academic experience focuses on blockchain, electronic voting, a little bit of privacy features as well. And for the past 3.5 years, he's been building tools and infrastructure for the Neo blockchain. And lastly, we have Gil Machado. He's the founder of AxLabs. AxLabs made its splash into the Neo ecosystem in very early 2019 with the release of the Neo3j Java library. And Gil has also been guest researching at the University of Zurich since 2009. So I'm really excited to have a wide variety of experience and interests and projects that are on the panel today. And so with the introductions out of the way, I think we'll jump into what I hope becomes a lively discussion. We have a handful of pre-planned questions and then a handful of questions from the community. So the first topic is kind of a broad, general topic. And I don't think that there's any right or wrong answer here because this is such a nascent field. But the first question is, what are the influences that DAOs are going to have on the world? And I'll leave it to one of you guys to start off.
I'll quickly start here. So you wrote what they have, but you said what they are going to have. So I don't know where exactly you want to go with the question, but like the influence DAOs have at the moment, I think are still pretty small and mostly restricted to the open source space. And even in that space, more to obviously to Web3 technologies, Web3 software. But that doesn't mean that they're only applicable to that. I mean, they're very well applicable to work that is in the digital space because they themselves are based on that technology. And I think in open source software but also in other in many different fields of digital work, including like production of graphics and marketing, DAOs will probably play a much bigger role than they are doing now. And we're still very much in the experimentation phase, I think. I mean, the whole blockchain space, I think, is still, even though it exists for like 10 and more years now, it's in my mind still experimentation. And so are DAOs. And well, we'll stop at this point and see what other people have to say about this.
Yeah, I agree and disagree. Well, I agree with Claude in the sense that, like, if you look to the population in general in the world, because that's the question, like, about the world, about like the common being of the population in general. If you see this in such a large scale, it's quite small, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of potential to reach these levels of influencing larger communities and like cities and this kind of stuff. But I mean, I believe a lot on DAOs in the potential that it can bring to organize this group of people, organize. I mean, there are different ways of building a DAO, or to how can I say, to materialize it, to give a voice to all the members, and to be fair, etc. But I see a lot of potential. And I mean, there are some examples these days that goes out of this financial use cases of DAOs and DeFi DAOs. I mean, if you look to the Constitution DAO, Dylan, you might be very familiar with that. So this is something, yeah, some face as a joke, some face as something to gain like popularity and marketing, but actually it was an experiment. And if you don't have an experiment like this that goes outside of this financial like niche of DeFi, etc., we're not never going to discover if the DAOs can get organized for the wider society. So I mean, in my point of view, like it's converging, but we have to build it. You have to get there.
Yeah, and Alibaba, you have interesting experience in bringing. You have interesting experience in bringing new projects to like governance. So what are I'm interested to hear kind of what's your opinion on how DAOs are going to impact the world, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how governance is a part of that as well.
Okay. Actually, NeoBurger is a governance stack built on Neo3 that serves as a voting tool by wrapping the Neo token. So in Neo Legacy, Neo tokens need to be wrapped into a Neo in order to be used in decentralized applications like Flamingo. And once wrapped, NEO becomes a contract-based asset following the NEP5 standard, which is divisible and easier to manage in smart contracts. And similarly, NeoBurger wraps the Neo token into Burger Neo or BNeo divisible. It is divisible to 8 decimals and easier, and it is as a standard NEP17 token on your 3. So unlike NEO, however, the BNeo contract doesn't retain the ownership of gas. It maintains a record of BNeo in a record of BNeo user balance and the proportion of gas to distribute to each. And the NeoBurger earns the majority of its gas by voting in Neo3's governance mechanism. And Neo put in the NeoBurger contract is automatically managed by a voting strategy designed to maximize the gas rewards. So yes, our this strategy is open source and reasonably optimal. So we know Neo is the first and best blockchain based on the DAO token model. So Neo built the DAO token model very early, and it is a very successful practice. And Neo is the governance token, and gas is the utility token. So when Neo goes to DeFi applications and exchanges, we focus on its financial profit rather than its governance and power. So, for example, when I deposit Neo into an exchange, I don't want the exchange to represent me to vote to new governance, especially when we have different opinions of some proposals. So the NeoBurger can behave as the honest delegate or trustee or delegatee or trustee. So on new governance. So some DeFi applications don't want to care about the new governance or native governance, or they just want a valuable asset of new token. So something like NeoBurger DAO or Burger DAO, the DAO of NeoBurger can play such a role to as the honest delegatee of the governance. So we hope that the DAO can not only play a good role on the blockchain world, but also play a role as a good connection between the real world and the blockchain world. For example, many things, for example, the cross-chain protocol, the Oracle protocol, the file system protocol can be implemented by something like a DAO. So, for example, Oracle, when we want to retrieve some information outside the blockchain, we can borrow something from the DAO, and the DAO can be honest and what to something they think it is real and true, and bring this information to blockchain. Yeah.
So one, sorry interrupting you, but I don't know exactly this example that you're giving here of using oracles associated to DAOs. I think like in the last panel, I gave a kind of a suggestion for our audience on ideas of what they can do with oracles and DAOs. I mean, it was. I mean, for example, if you have like a DAO and then you need to decide or to come up with who will have the decision power of voting proposals or doing something in this DAO, you could fetch this information from oracles from the outside world. One example is, I mean, this is kind of silly, but imagine that you have a DAO that it matters how much code you contributed to a repository. You know, like in GitHub, commits to GitHub, or how many comments you had on GitHub. So you could have like, I mean, there are like a lot of problems in this setup, but this is just an idea that it will impact that the real world will. You're gonna bring like some information from the real world and get into the DAOs to make decisions, to empower people, to be fair, to organize them. So yeah, this is a good example, and I hope that someone will do something like this in our hackathon. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you give us a very good example. For example, the GitHub contributions of the repo. So it's a very subjective opinion to evaluate someone's contribution to a repo or project. So something like this, it really need a DAO to evaluate such contributions and such subjective values.
Yeah, and Alibaba, you were mentioning that the structure of Neo is it's a dual token model. So in one sense, we have a broad community of not only developers, but also token holders who hold Neo, and they can choose to wrap it and be Neo. But then the kind of line of logic you're pulling on is very much oriented around oracles and NeoFS. So when we're talking about how DAOs can influence the world, are you more focused, and with NeoBurger, are you more focused on kind of how developers can utilize the voting power of a DAO for infrastructural purposes? Or are there other realms that NeoBurger is going to take into consideration when its DAO gets built?
Okay, I think the Burger DAO of NeoBurger is a special DAO that can. Actually, it's a special DAO. We only focus on a single project, for example, NeoBurger, and we want to find a balance between the efficiency, the profit, and the justify. So we may introduce the BNEO holders and maybe the NeoBurger governance token holders to together to join the DAO of the NeoBurger and to make the decision on new council member election and other decision of the NeoBurger proposals. So, but for more general uses, maybe it's better to choose another application or or maybe some DAO mechanism introduced by AxLabs or some other new communities. It's a more general DAO, and maybe the Burger DAO can migrate to this kind of general DAO in the future once it is ready. Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about that. I think as we go through the questions and answers, we'll also be touching on this subject matter on how DAOs will have an impact on the world. So we'll just move on to the next topic, which is something that is starting to become more apparent, or maybe not. Here in the States, Shapeshift was a non-custodial exchange that had to go through KYC issues because the United States government was saying that they're arbiters of trades. And in response, they've recently begun decentralizing their corporate model and becoming more of a decentralized autonomous organization. So I only bring that example up because we're just beginning to see what can be possible with DAOs viewed as employers rather than individuals at the top of a corporate model. So I think this is a good question that could go in a lot of different directions. Do you think DAOs can become employers in the future? And I think I want to start with hearing what you have to say about this, Claude.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about regulations on this topic, and I think companies should not just become structurally a DAO just to evade liability. And I don't even know if that works. You know, if the law if the regulations are such that you can actually evade certain regulations by becoming a DAO. I don't know exactly how the regulations are at the moment, but I think that's one problem that I don't know anything about. I'm only technical. Mm-hmm. So I think when DAOs evolve and become more popular, the side of regulation is a very important part, of course, of that. But besides that, I think that's one goal of DAOs is, so I mean, it's an organization, and one main organization type that we have are companies in this world. And it sounds kind of nice if you could make company into a DAO, into a very decentralized and self-managing organization, which is something that I think is anyway happening even without blockchain and without DAOs. Companies are trying to become more self-managed, if you can say that, where you have like circles of people and specific roles, but you don't really have the big hierarchies anymore, and you try to have, you know, services. Like one circle is basically a service to all the other circles. Like HR could be a service to all the other circles. But if one circle decides, okay, we can do HR on our own, because the HR circle is not really providing good service, and they can do it on them by themselves, and that's also kind of an evaluation of the HR circle, stuff like that. And that kind of matches the principle of DAOs quite well, I think. And there we can, or people are trying to kind of match that and try to have self-managed organizations as DAOs. And if it's good to start centralized and then go decentralized, I don't know. I think both ways are hard. Starting decentralized kind of sounds harder, because you don't have, obviously you give away control from the beginning, and you need to trust, or you need to kind of already know many people that are starting the DAO at that point. While if you do it centralized and then try to go decentralized, you can still have a lot of influence. Like few people can have a lot of influence in the beginning, and then once structures are set up, correctly, then you can decentralize. But yeah, I think like for some, I don't know, just from a view from companies, I think DAOs can become employers, and I myself, I'm kind of drawn to starting to work on a DAO. I mean, basically, there's so many DAOs at the moment in the Web3 space. You can just go and look for work in any kind of DAO and try it out and see how it works. And a DAO like it, has rules set up on how it works. For example, how you get compensated. And if you're not fine with those rules, then don't join it, or maybe talk to the people that are already in the DAO and see if they would change that and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's something that's very transparent, and so you can, from the beginning, you know what you're getting into, I think.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting question. Is a DAO just the technology and the code, or is a DAO a social understanding of the people who are a part of it?
Yeah, I think both. Yeah, it seems in my mind, I think it takes a certain kind of people to work in a DAO. Mm-hmm. Also, just in this self-managed organization, where you need people with a lot of initiative, I would say, because they're not getting work pressed on from up in the hierarchy, but they decide themselves if they should take on a new customer or not. So yeah, that it's, yeah, I don't know if it also needs a shift in how people want to work.
Right. So then, Gil, I guess the question I want to pose to you is, a DAO an employer, or is it just the group of people who choose to participate in that environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me go one step back here. Maybe okay. I'm dreaming too far, but it relates where I live, which is Switzerland. Claude, maybe he can give us his opinions as well on this matter. But let me make a strong statement here. Maybe the society that we live here in Switzerland, which is highly democratic and like with direct voting for a lot of topics, we are living in some sort of DAO, but without technology and without an immutable ledger, and without technology. Because like people are here, like we have a constitution, we have like rules, we have a common understanding on how things work, but I mean, the society, a group of people, like a country, I mean, they are working nowadays without this empowering technology that if you propose something, it will be executed. It will have like transparency in what you voted, and you have like other many properties of a DAO. I mean, that we know of. Of course, that in the DAO that we know of today, especially if you think about DeFi, etc., one token is one vote. Not always, but most of the times. But in the society, is not like this. And so there are many things that we're far away. But I see that in the future that societies could be organized like in DAOs if they wish to. But I mean that's what I was thinking while Claude was talking about that, because here in Switzerland we have I mean it's impressive how many proposals and voting periods and the topics that you can get a voice and change things. which in like other countries are not is not like this. So yeah, my strong statement, I don't know if it's popular or unpopular, but we are already living kind of a DAO, but without technology and without a immutable like ledger and this kind of stuff. But if you go like one level below and talk about more concrete things about if employers, if DAOs can be employers in the future, etc., for sure, my answer is yes. But there are certain things that still the society is not prepared. I'm gonna give you one. So in some time in the past, I was in a conference and someone from Naked DAO like was talking to me, was chatting, and he said to me, "Look, we have a problem. It's pretty simple, but it's concrete. I mean, domain names. Domain names, like who should own this domain name? Like it's an entity, like it's a person. The person should have more power in the DAO only because he owns that domain name. So, you know, there is some kind of infrastructure outside in the side that is not yet prepared to match the DAOs but so this one statement, but we're getting there slowly. But your question, Dylan, just to finish it off, your question about if people should get into DAOs or employers should adopt people to so I don't know. I think like both will work. You can always, if you're interested, you can join a DAO and do something and get paid by it and make proposals. But maybe there will be other DAOs that you need to be part of. Otherwise, you lose something. Like I mean, I'll give you an example. In a country, in your city, if you're not part of the city and you abstain on the decisions of your city or a group or association, someone is going to decide for you. Because you abstain. So like I think both ways will work or will exist in the future.
Yeah, that the whole concept of participating in governance alone can be a touchy subject. You know, I'm based in the US and you have a lot of people with opinions and not everyone who votes. So that's also something that I think needs to be taken into consideration. And so when you're thinking about participation, Alibaba, you know, if not everyone participates, but they want to be part of a DAO, is that fair to say that like a DAO can become an employer then?
Yeah. Okay. I think DAO is definitely a good DAO, a good employer. So. If I can, I'm really willing to be employed by a DAO, and because it is auditable, transparent, and everything you can see. Maybe even they want to fire you, they need to launch a meeting to discuss to vote for the decisions, and you will see. How much you have been supported and how much you have been voted against. You have more information from the employer, and you will know more about the company decisions. And I think it's a cool way. And I believe in the future there will more and more DAO-based companies and DAO-based employers, and even DAOs and DAOs can make connections and cooperation with each other, and maybe they can have something like a union or even DAO and DAOs can be employed. DAO can be employed by another DAO, and maybe I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to have like. You can have in a big DAO, in a big organization, you can have sub DAOs, you know, that are more decoupled. I mean, they're part of the work of the whole organization, but they they're kind of a unit that can produce stuff by themselves and they function by themselves. And so then if they see, okay, our parent DAO doesn't really have enough work for us, they just go and sell their work to some other organization. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, and maybe the core company can employ some other specialist or some professional professors or some researchers on a specific question or problem or a specific area, and delegate them to deal with some questions, and yeah, it could be more efficient.
Alibaba, so I only ask you because you were talking about GitHub earlier. How do you integrate GitHub or third-party sources to validate whether somebody is who they say they are, or whether they can contribute the type of work that's necessary for a DAO? What are the ways that we can review and approve people who want to participate in a DAO?
Oh, I think it's a very, 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 very hard question to evaluate who can contribute or how much they contribute or even approve or even something like this. It's very hard because for me, it's really hard to make the subjective decisions. It's hard for me to say it's really yes or it's really no. So most of times maybe we can we may launch an inner or public voting, and we can say we can collect everyone's opinions and make the final decision. And for GitHub, I think we use GitHub a lot, and not only because it provides very stable infrastructures to host the website, to host some automatic posts, but we use GitHub as a trusted environment. We use GitHub a lot, and even if GitHub, although GitHub is a centralized website, but sometimes after we ensure the safety and security, and we sometimes rely on GitHub to build many layer 2 applications, or sometimes we use GitHub to store some insistent information on GitHub, and maybe sometimes GitHub play a role as a community. Maybe sometimes we just talk with each other on GitHub, and we evaluate the contribution by their code or by their issue or by their comment. But finally, I think subjective problems is really hard to evaluate. So most of times we just launch a vote of this. We say yes and no and make the final decision. It's really hard for me, and I'm still find if there is a good way to solve this problem.
Yeah, that's another I wouldn't say area of concern, but maybe a question that I have is, if everybody's going to be sharing partial ownership of being a maintainer of a DAO, what are the forums for communicating? What's the best way to come to a quorum? Maybe not everyone uses GitHub, or maybe not everyone uses Discord. So how do you best incorporate everybody's opinions, thoughts? How do you weight that in decisions moving forward? Especially for something that's decentralized, but everybody's supposed to be on the same page about.
Difficult question.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I would just say one organization has a certain number of channels that people have to be on in order to take part. I wouldn't, like for a real company DAO, I wouldn't take GitHub, for example. I would use the normal business tools like Slack. But if you have something very open, then you probably want to have a forum where you can see all the history of all the discussions and decisions that were made. But I think there's no fixed tool for the discussions themselves. I think whatever works for the organization is good. There's tools being built specifically for DAOs at the moment, I think, because I mean, in Ethereum, there's a lot of things going on and about DAOs. They have a lot of technologies already up and running, and some tools are being built around that. One is Coordinape. I don't know if you know that. This one is meant for the compensation part, because it's hard to find out who should get how much money. And Coordinape, their first tool is about that, and there it's just about, so you're part of a circle, meaning that you've worked on a product with some other people, and then you're allowed to kind of give votes to people or give them kudos if you worked with them a lot and you saw that they were contributing to the product. And in the end, then you get from some treasury, you get according to the tokens you receive from your coworkers, you get your salary basically.
Mm-hmm. So basically,
I'm not sure if that works. Yeah, so go ahead. Sorry.
No. Basically, then it's a DAO with a kind of reputation system of its members, something like this. Yeah,
but like epoch wise, right? You don't get a reputation for the whole time you've been there. Maybe as well, but that's decoupled from the compensation. The compensation is based on kind of the reputation you get for the last epoch where you were working in.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you could have malicious actors who try to game systems by joining a DAO and working really hard for a month or two, and then they've built up this great reputation, and then they leave. They earn this compensation and they go and do the same thing in another DAO potentially. That's a really interesting way to kind of combat sort of a nefarious act.
Yeah, and you can also see graphs, who work with whom and how much they value that cooperation with another person.
Very cool. This brought up a question, and since I used to work for the government and I had great benefits. And then when I migrated to working in the blockchain space, I'm now a contractor. And in the US, you have to piece together your healthcare and all sorts and insurance and things like this yourself, which typically an employer would provide for you. So I guess the question we have to ask, and I'm curious to hear what it's like in the regions you guys live in. If a DAO is going to become an employer, are there also going to have to be other DAOs or other services that provide things like insurance or things that companies would typically provide for their employees? Or is that even an issue?
No, that's exactly how I imagine it. That if you want to have these benefits when you work at a DAO, you probably need DAOs, or you need like digitalized systems for all these benefits that it can integrate with the DAO. Otherwise it's just going to be manual work as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think go ahead.
Go ahead, Claude. No, go ahead, Claude. Just finish here.
Yeah, the problem is embedding DAOs in the existing system. I think really getting. It needs a lot of things to adapt to it. I think if you want to have it, if you really want to get the biggest performance or like efficiency boost out of it.
Not to cut off any line of logic you were about to go down, Gil, but this is a perfect transition into the next part of this conversation. And you were just mentioning that there needs to be these services that provide things that typically corporations provided. So the question I want to pose to you guys is, what are the current limitations of DAOs? What is holding them back from becoming ubiquitous and used everywhere across the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think like legal, some legal certainty for sure it will help. That's. But I mean, we should start. I see that we should start small. For example, maybe we like experiment with associations, small associations, non-profit ones. Being governed by a DAO without having like a bunch of papers somewhere, like in the city house. So I think like these small examples, we should, I mean, some like legal frameworks should embrace it first, and then going to companies and different level of companies, and then like finally to governments, etc. But the current limitations, like if AxLabs will be a DAO, I mean, we will have to pay, for example, social security. We have to pay, for example, health insurance, which is, I mean, yeah, some kind of insurance, and it's difficult to be represented as a DAO, to these insurances or to the government. So it's impossible. So it's this. If you're thinking about an employer that will become a DAO in the current society, you have like bunch of limitations. Of course, that like you could see DAOs that are on top of all of this. For example, you have a DAO, and then you have a bunch of contractors, associated to this DAO. But then you're just overcoming the problem and not going to the source of the problem, so which is the integration of DAOs to the society. I know that you should evolve in small steps, and then you should make things happen in smaller steps. But I think like maybe like a DAO which will provide insurance will emerge, or the government will enable some sort of associations or types of companies to be governed by a DAO, and then go step by step. But in like the limitations that I mentioned before, even these very simple ones: who owns a domain name, there was another example. You need servers for a cloud service. You need servers. You need to host your stuff. Who gonna hold the contract if it's associated to me, which is a member of the DAO, and I hold it? I can shut it off, the whole infrastructure, like without giving any satisfaction to anyone. So maybe I should have more power in this DAO. But how do I measure that I have more power in the DAO because of a contract that I have in a cloud service? So this kind of integrations, there's a lot of limitations these days, in my opinion, and this is, I don't know how. I'm not a specialist, on this, but maybe oracles can help us, like in our original discussion in the beginning of the panel. What do you guys think?
Okay. Yeah, I actually want to pose this to Alibaba. Are the current limitations, are they technological? Is it dealing with technology, or is it more society? Is it more people coordinating?
Okay. So I feel like that in the technical side, I think the limitation is that it is expensive. It's really expensive to build a DAO on the blockchain. So one example is the Aragon project on Ethereum. Actually, we are a user of Aragon, and we use it very. Our experience. To be honest, our experience is very terrible because it is really expensive to maybe last year or the year before last year when we submit a proposal, it need to cost us maybe $1,000 to submit the proposal, and the voting need maybe one vote need maybe $100 or even more. So it's really expensive. So our voters will not willing to vote on the DAO. It's a very, very terrible experience. So if every voters doesn't want to vote on the DAO, the voting rate is really low. If the voting rate is low, the result of the DAO is cannot represent everyone's real choice. It's a fake result. So it's a very hard problem to find to solve this problem, and it's something like a tragedy of commons. Yeah. So if I don't contribute, I don't vote, he don't vote, everyone don't vote. So some bad man or some hackers may take some profit, or may take some bad things from the DAO. And so beyond of this, besides this, the economic model of the DAO is really important. So in new legacy, in new 2, almost no one vote for the consensus nodes except the new foundation. So because everyone gets nothing from the voting, from the election, from node election. So when we have new 3, more and more people, more and more new holders vote for their elected consensus nodes and council members. So because of the gas incentives, so a good incentive can maybe advertise. It's a very good advertisement, and everyone will be willing to vote in the DAO. So probably a good economic model will help a lot, but it's a hard problem.
Gil, before we go, I just want to pull one more thread.
All right.
Alibaba, you mentioned in the beginning of our chat, and Gil just talked about it as well, oracles. So could you just help me learn a little bit more about how an oracle can help solve some current limitations?
Okay, so in many scenarios, we need to, for example, we need to count the votes, count everyone's vote, or maybe we need to bring many informations from the real world. So we need the oracle. For example, in the design of Burger DAO, we want to store everyone's vote on somewhere else. For example, NewFS or some on GitHub, or GitHub, we just store everyone's vote on GitHub. So we need something trustable that can bring the votes from outside chain into our DAO contract. So we need an oracle or something like that or something like a trusted environment to bring this kind of information into our DAO contract, and we can count the vote and find the final decision. And another thing is that the oracle itself is something like a DAO, because for example, in Neo, we have about 7 or more oracle nodes. They try to retrieve the real world data, and they have a vote mechanism. Then they find after commitment of the consensus, they find the final result and submit the final result into the blockchain. And this kind of mechanism is something like a DAO. So the oracle itself can be implemented based on DAO, and it can bring some more benefits to other DAOs. Yeah.
So basically, what you're telling one is that the problem of vote buying, because you have like a huge problem of vote buying votes in DAOs, and like this is one of the limitations of DAOs. So we can alleviate this voting buying using oracles and in like getting external like information, because I mean, yeah, there is like some problems with voting voting with tokens in DAOs, but there are some solutions like delegation and in other things. But for vote buying, it's pretty hard. And I mean, I just can see that fetching data and limiting the power of a token under certain conditions that should be fetched from the outside, for example, would partially solve this this vote buying problem.
Yeah.
But that brings another question into play then. If we're worried about vote buying and one entity potentially holding 40% of the voting power, how far does the DAO need to go to ensure that these actors can't just manipulate the vote? Does the Oracle need to start pinging where the IP addresses are coming from? Does the Oracle need to start, or does there need to be another layer that maybe looks to see if these are Sybil accounts that are potentially tied to one another? What is the kind of authority that needs to be given to a DAO in order to ensure that everybody can vote and have their representation matter?
Well, like if you have a token-based governance system, then you can't really evade that. If somebody has more than 50% of all tokens, they have a pretty strong vote, obviously. Then that's just that. Then you have to change the voting model to something else. If you have an organization that works as a company, then it probably doesn't make sense to have token-based voting for internal decisions. So then it's just certain roles have certain decision power, and that's it, I think. But if we talk about funding, for example, if you want to decide where a DAO spends their funding, or if you have a donation DAO, basically like Gitcoin, then there it makes sense to use quadratic funding. Or I mean, that's one technique that people start to rely on, which reduces the effect of a big whale. And there it's not just the amount of token you have that results in your voting power, but if you even if you pay a lot tokens as a donation, you don't have much more power than someone who only gives $1, for example, as a donation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think if you're sorry, not just go ahead.
No, I see. No, it's I think it's good, Claude. Like I see the future of DAOs as with hybrid solutions. Not only token-based voting, but they have like a hybrid, a basket of solution on how you will provide decision power to individuals. Like token, yes, because this will be like a financial incentives and a financial mechanism, but also you could combine this with proof of participation, or you could combine this with how much you contribute, to this DAO. And then like combining, I think it gets closer to what the society is all about. I think it gets a bit better accepted, but there are plenty of challenges on implementing these hybrid solutions, hybrid mechanisms of like proof of participation and proof of whatever, and like identity, and like putting this all in the same bag to give decision power to individuals. So, but anyway, I mean, we could go on and on and on about this, and we're not going to find a solution. But I'm curious to see what are the use cases, what people in the hackathon will touch, in the DAOs, like in the projects related to DAOs, etc.
And okay, I mean, and the token-based voting system, maybe there is a big, there is an interesting thing is that maybe there will be a project they can collect every individual's governance token, and they lend them to someone. Maybe they need the tokens to vote. So if they collect a huge amount of the governance token into the pool and pay the depositors profit, maybe 12% APY, and they will be happy, and they'll be happy to deposit their own governance tokens into the project, and then the project lend something to someone else if they want to bypass their proposals quickly. They can borrow something from the project, and because the a huge token holder, and actually this kind of thing is a big challenge or big risk of the token based DAO voting system. Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's bribery, right?
Yeah.
You pay people for the votes, but that's like there's some Ethereum project that's called Bribe, and it does exactly that. You can deposit your tokens there. I'm not sure how it works exactly, and then you kind of get some yield on the tokens, and somebody else can come and buy these tokens to vote.
Yeah.
And I mean, the rationale behind it is that it makes it more efficient, like, because otherwise these votes would not be used. So I think for a big part, it's about unused voting power and distributing that to people who actually want that voting power. But in the end, it's bribery. So yeah, it's a funny approach.
Yeah, and then this kind of project can be the dictator of all the DAO-based projects. It can be a dictator.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then an interesting question that poses is, as non-fungible tokens become more and more mainstream, do we start to migrate from a voting model that utilizes fungible tokens, like, if I have 1,000 of vote tokens, I'm not going to have as powerful a vote as somebody with 10,000 vote tokens. But if I have an NFT that maybe gives me a certain attribute that allows me to vote on certain processes, or maybe even if we're examining NFTs that are based on artwork, if I have a hat, then I'm allowed to vote. But if I don't have a hat, then I'm not allowed to vote. So is this something that in your guys' research you're coming across? Are there projects that are starting to look at voting based off of NFTs as opposed to number or amounts of fungible tokens?
I think for NFTs, it really like equipment in video games. So I think it's hard to design such detailed rules in a DAO to each specific NFTs. It's a bit hard, but sometimes we find it is necessary. So, for example, we need someone to, if he say no, the proposal will be never bypassed. It's a power of saying no. So we can grant such powers to some professional researchers or some professional advisors. It's a good choice to use NFTs to grant NFT to such kind of advisors. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're going for a permission model where I as maybe I'm a core developer in somewhere, and so I get the core developer token, and that grants me power to vote on certain decisions. Yeah, and so you can collect tokens for different kinds of proposals.
That brings an interesting question, and I think we're kind of done with the limitations of DAOs, and I want to migrate to the Q&A session and just kind of get a little bit more open-ended here. So you guys have, we're representing two different DAO projects in the Neo ecosystem right now, Grant Shares DAO and Burger DAO. Obviously that we've had a lot of conversations about different types of DAOs in the Ethereum ecosystem because the composability just exists there. That's where a lot of the developers are. So in your research of other DAOs and other ecosystems, what are some examples of types of DAOs you'd like to see in the Neo ecosystem beyond the two projects that are represented in this panel today?
Gil, you should talk about Snapshot.
Yeah, exactly.
Should
Yeah.
I?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you remind me. Yeah. So yes. I mean, actually, snapshot.org is not really a DAO, but it's something that I would like to see in the new ecosystem. So let me brief you what it is. So in other ecosystems, not only in Ethereum, but let's get to Polkadot, or like let's go to maybe Cardano, or yeah, like Terra. So they have like some DAOs, and then if the DAO is not successful, but if the DAO grows, people take the code and fork it to enhance it and to become like a better version of the DAO mechanism, or to adapt for a purpose. But I mean, the DAOs, they have a core, some sort of let's say methods or functions that all DAOs should have, like create proposals, voting, attributes, states of a proposal, like in review, in voting period, and like in execution, time lock, whatever. And so once you have like this core, which might be a formal standard or not necessarily, people say, okay, this is solid, this was audited, let me fork this project, let me create my DAO, and let's move on. Okay, so, and then imagine that you have like 2 or 3 or 4 DAOs deployed on mainnet. So the question is how you would interact with them. Like, you need a DApp, but then like the grant shares DAO DApp might not be exactly the same as the ones for NeoBurger, the functions, or like the visuals or whatever. So that's where snapshot.org comes to the play as an example. Is basically a platform where they build some kind of infrastructure where you can interact or vote or create proposals for many DAOs following a certain standard. And this is pretty fascinating, because then you foster, the community grows with having a platform that it can embrace many DAOs in is generic kind of enough that you see the proposal for one DAO, the proposal for the other, you voting, who voted and who, and all these basic functions. But if you would like to interact with DAOs in a more specific way, for example, in grant shares, you can, I don't know, members of grant shares can endorse a proposal, which is not really part of a kind of a generic DAO infrastructure. So then you have to go to the grant shares DApp, which going to provide the specific functions. So that's what I'm really into kind of these days, or maybe in a hackathon someone could also do this, is something similar to snapshot.org.
And you, Alibaba, in your research, you mentioned that you were participating in Aragon, and you mentioned kind of the limitations that a widely used blockchain network with not as much throughput presents in the term of fees. But what are some other DAOs that you researched when building out Burger DAO that interested you, and maybe what are some examples that you would like to see on Neo N3?
Okay, so last summer I talked with Ricardo, and he was building a DAO like Aragon and named Ultimate DAO, if I remember correctly. And so I think it's another interesting project, and its design is really similar to Aragon. And I feel Aragon is very interesting, but it's a bit heavy and a bit expensive. And eventually I find that I feel like the blockchain is only acting as a log server or of the DAO, and then, in other words, the DAO itself can be deployed maybe on multiple blockchains, and then executing its decisions on multiple chains with the help of cross-chain interoperation protocols, or maybe okay, maybe I hope maybe something interesting, maybe something new kind of DAO can be deployed on Neo. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a question that I wanted to hear a little bit more about. What is the state of cross-chain DAOs? Are they prominent? Are people just starting to examine this issue? Is there even a need for cross-chain DAOs right now? Because maybe someone voting on something in the Cosmos ecosystem isn't going to be impacted if they're active in the Neo ecosystem. So is this something that people are looking into? Is it something that people should be looking into?
Well, the only thing that comes to my mind is if you have financial streams that go between blockchains, then you can have DAOs interact from between multiple chains. But having one DAO spread over multiple chains, I haven't seen that. Don't know if that exists. I mean, probably does. So many things exist in this space, but I don't see the direct purpose or like use case for this. Why someone would want to have this? But you could just basically have two DAOs and two chains, and if one DAO, if it's only about financial matters, then you could just send money from one treasury to the other.
Yeah, I imagine this this problem will become more and more common as we start seeing moves like what Terra did with using Bitcoin to back the US Terra stablecoin. So we're eventually moving into a world where, you know, cross-chain communication between DAOs might become something that we talk about, but maybe we're still too early. Maybe that's 2 to 3 years out. But something that I think today that could benefit a lot of developers, and especially as we talk about Neo N3 being the most developer-friendly blockchain, are there plans, or have you heard of plans, or what's the need for something like DAO House, a no-code DAO builder? Is that something that the Neo ecosystem needs today, or is that a desire that the developers have? Curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, we did a devlog on governance contracts in Java, and we saw there some interest in that actually, so that we could have a more not centralized generic infrastructure for DAOs. In that example, it was something that where you would have one contract that handles. Well, let me first differentiate here between DAO and governance. Like often we speak about DAOs, but we actually just mean governance, like governance mechanisms. While I think a DAO is something that would be much more complex, but also there's like social things that come into play. And mostly we're talking about governance, and you could have a centralized, no, let me not say centralized again, like one contract that in Neo that you can use, that you can interact with, that you can create proposals on, but for your own project. So every project would have their own space on that contract, and voting can take place for different projects without those projects needing to set up their own governance mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, you could also just create template contracts, basically library code that people can reuse and build upon for the governance. Coming back to what Giel said about Snapshot, Snapshot offers different strategies for voting. So I think that's something that would be helpful in Neo, that we already offer code that that people can take and use, for token-based voting, NFT-based voting, like you said, Dylan, and then doing grant rounds with quadratic funding and these kind of things.
Awesome. And Alibaba, you mentioned that DAOs, they can be expensive because there's so much that's stored on chain. So I just want to hear a little bit more about how Burger DAO is addressing this, and what does the architecture look like for the code for Burger DAO?
Okay, so Burger DAO, first Burger DAO will be a proposal-based, because yes, no question is the simplest and easiest. And we investigate some past practices like Snapshot and Aragon, and finally we made some design goals. First, it should be secure and auditable, and second, it should be efficient and easy and simple to use. And we have implemented two versions of Burger DAO. One is layer 2 based, and another is NeoFS based. And because we want to store more data on a cheaper place, and but we will still trying to find some better way if it exists, and we are willing to cooperate with other new community projects, including AxLabs, and propose our DAO standard and provide more toolkit and examples for other projects. And I think we still have some fundamental prerequisite for the maybe new native infrastructure, new wallets, and as well as some standards for fundamental standards for new wallets and new infrastructures. For example, we need a standard of new signatures. So if we want to store the signature of chain or a new FS on somewhere else, we need the wallet can send some message instead of send a transaction. If we send a transaction, we need to release the transaction and pay the transaction fee. But if we only send a message, we can make it cheaper. But we need such a standard that can supported by most of new wallets, and then we can easily send a simple message: I vote for some proposal, or I vote against some proposal, and it will be much more cheap. Yeah.
Standards always seem to be the Achilles heel when trying to have dApps communicate with one another in different types of use cases. We have a question from the community. What kind of skills do you think a developer needs to have in order to participate in a DAO project?
Communication skills. Well, at this point, I'm not sure what exactly is meant with the DAO project. I mean, it depends on the DAO, of course. I would expect this is a project which also builds the DAO itself. So then, of course, you need the understanding of the blockchain world, of smart contract languages, and otherwise, if a DAO is already fully established, it could be that you're just doing normal developer work that's not necessarily blockchain related. Could be implementing a front end for the DAO.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with Claude. I think if you're really interested on being part of a DAO or supporting a DAO, or yeah, just come to Discord, talk to us. That's the best, always the best thing to do. But generally speaking, yeah, programming skills, and you can choose many languages in the new ecosystem because you have like support for many, from Python, C# and Java, and like Golang and TypeScript. So yeah, Kotlin. So yeah, I think there's space for everyone. And if you're not, I mean, that's what I want to emphasize here, guys. if you're not a software engineer and still we want to be in contact with a DAO and like submit a proposal and this kind of stuff, no worries. You have, for example, Grant Shares, which is a project that we from AxLabs we are working on. And if you want to go to grantshares.io, you will see that this project will be governed by a DAO, and you can submit your proposals for a meetup, for community growth, for whatever you want to build, and to grow the new community. So this one way also to be part or to have a contact with a DAO without being a software engineer. So you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always like to reiterate this point. I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer. I worked for the government before I worked for Neo News Today. If you have an ability to write and help individuals convey a message, then there's always a role for you in collaborating with developers, because devs at the end of the day focus on code and building a product. They're not always figuring out the best way to communicate to the general public and other folks what's being built. So there's, no matter how large, high scale or small scale you are, there's always a role for anyone who has a passion and interest in blockchain projects. Wrapping up, respectful of everybody's time, we did have one more question from the community. And I think maybe based on Burger DAO and on Grant Shares, there's going to be two different answers for this. But if a DAO is funded today, what is the best way for community members to contribute to it and to make sure that it becomes more sustainable? So like in a perfect example, if a Neo holder wants to distribute a portion of their gas to future holdings for the DAO, what's kind of like the thought process behind that right now? Is that something that you guys are thinking about? And I know that you probably have a lot of answers for Grant Shares, but I want to maybe start with Alibaba. What are the best ways to raise funds for a DAO and then continue contributing to it from a community's perspective?
Okay. So as you said, I think if you are patient, you are willing to contribute to a DAO. So actually, NeoBurger have the organization of NeoBurger. We don't have any teams or long-term contributors. We just contribute by some short time or some contributors, which maybe someone they are willing to write a line of code. They write a line of proposals. They just submit their issues or submit their code, or just send an email to us, and we can discuss with each other. And we made such a simple project. Actually, NeoBurger, the code of NeoBurger is very, very clear and short, and but we discussed very often, and we discussed in detail. So actually, if you have patience, or if you are willing to contribute, I think DAOs in Neo will be open and free to and welcome everyone to join together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just pose the question for either of you two as our final question, Gil and Claude. Grant Shares is funded now by Neo Foundation, but assuming this program becomes wildly successful, what are the best ways that maybe a community can fund, maybe not Grant Shares, but a project, a DAO like Grant Shares? What is like a thought process that goes in behind that?
So you mean how they could financially collaborate, basically, or?
Yeah, and the specific question that was posed to me is somebody asked, their Neo generates gas. So what if they want to distribute a portion of that gas income into a DAO to be used for funding future projects? Maybe what are some other considerations like this?
Well, like they could do it with grant shares if we add them as a funder. But doing it in future DAOs it really depends on the DAO. If we like grant shares is the first experiment or the first version of such a DAO, which is about funding community projects in Neo with money from Neo, and we'll have to see if we get a lot of attention and people are interested in this, and if we get a lot of proposals, we definitely will continue the development and probably adapt grant shares, and then probably there will be other projects as well that will sprout out of Neo that will also go in the direction of funding projects, because there's many things we can still explore. I mean, the grant shares DAO or the governance mechanism as it is now is pretty simple, but we could go into a direction where still Neo Foundation is the biggest funder, but if we use quadratic funding, for example, as a mechanism, we could enable people to fund specific projects. So every time, like every quarter, we have a funding round, for example, Neo Foundation gives a big chunk of the funding into the pot, but then other people come in and they have a say on to which project the money goes. But to have a say, you also have to donate a small part, right? But it can start with one gas. You don't have to have thousands of gas. So I think this would be really nice if we could head this direction in the future.
Yeah, just to complement Claude's saying, which, I mean, we're totally in line. We already thought about going to this direction. But just to complement, I think like as I said before in the panel, hybrid solutions are the ones that approximate better with the real world. So like maybe in future we'll still have the grant shares DAO members making like decisions. Half of the power, half of the decision power will still be in a group of decision makers from our community, like AxLabs, COZ, like NGD, New Foundation, New Research, etc. New today. But maybe the other half we open, exactly like Claude said, to people that put one gas. You're gonna have like one token, or you're gonna have a decision power, a say on the DAO. But this is not for now. This doesn't work like this at the moment. But we're thinking about this for the near future.
I think this is a great place to wrap up, and it's really interesting that we ended on this question, because if you are following along with the Polaris hackathon, there will be a portion towards the end of the event called Polaris Plus, which will focus on individuals being able to contribute to projects that they liked during the hackathon, in which they will also receive match funding, which will vary according to a quadratic formula. So we get to see from a social level, potentially the very first seeds being planted for the community investing or supporting projects that they liked that arised from the hackathon. So in wrapping up, maybe I want to ask each of you, for somebody who's exploring a DAO, what's the message that you want to say to them for the hackathon? So maybe Alibaba, someone who's building a DAO project in the hackathon, what's the one thing that you want to say to them?
Probably I'm optimistic for all kinds of DAOs on Neo and all kinds of blockchains, and probably I'd like to see something like a Nobel Prize DAO or Olympic DAO. And maybe your design or your idea can win the Nobel Prize in the future. I'm not sure. Okay.
Awesome, thanks. And Gil, if you could give one message to somebody building a DAO-based project for the hackathon, what would it be?
So DAOs strongly relates to community, so whatever you're building, find friends, find people around you that support like this idea of the purpose of this DAO, And I think this is a really good start, is to getting people, gluing them together for a purpose in this DAO. So I really encourage you guys to do this because, you know, of course you have to build the stuff, but that's a consequence of grouping together.
Right on. And wrapping up with Claude, if you had a message for somebody building a DAO-based application for the hackathon, what would it be?
So even if you might have, if it seems that there are many problems that the DAO might face because of mechanism design, because of incentives, I just recommend just doing it and experimenting in practice and seeing what the experience is then.
I feel like this panel could have probably gone on for another hour and a half. This is such a fascinating topic, and you guys have done a lot of great research and a lot of great work in bringing the first DAOs to the Neo ecosystem. So it was an honor to be able to host this panel today. I want to thank Alibaba. I want to thank Claude. I want to thank Gil. You guys were gracious with your time and the information that you built. So thank you so much for joining this panel. And thank you to Neo Global Development for hosting this event and for giving us a forum to be able to share these ideas and concepts and topics. Ultimately, DAOs are a social layer that are empowered by blockchain. And I think it's these types of conversations that hopefully plant a seed in the next great DAO that we see built on the Neo ecosystem. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was awesome.